Is there anyone else that would like to address the board this evening? Seeing none, we'll close the public session, and we'll move on to our action items. I'd like a motion for items A1 through A9.
So moved.
Mrs. Becker and Mrs. Shaw, is there any discussion on those items?
Are you doing a roll call, or you?
Voice vote.
Doesn't need a roll call.
No, voice vote.
Abstain.
You can just identify which you want to abstain on.
8 and 9.
Then let's do a roll call.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Mrs. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Chu?
I'm sorry, is this the, I'm still,
The minutes.
just pulled it up, the minutes.
Yeah, the minutes.
Okay, I have a correction to the September 10 minutes. There's a typo. It says members present, it should be not present.
Oh, yes, okay. We'll make
because I
that
was not
correction.
present, So,
Okay. Noted. Okay, Mrs. Becker was a yes.
Yep.
Mrs. Chu?
with the correction and abstaining from September 10th.
Okay, that's item
A8.
A8. Mrs. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Lax?
Yes, with abstentions on A8 and A9.
Mr. McAvoy?
Yes.
Mr. Philipchak?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Simmons?
Yes, abstain A1, A9.
A9?
A1 and A9.
A1. And Dr. Cohen?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
I'd like a motion for item B1, acceptance of HIB report, and please note that that was an update in our computers on that item.
So moved.
Mrs.
Second.
Becker, Mrs. Shaw, is there any discussion? Do I need a roll call?
Yes. Mrs. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Chu?
Yes.
Mrs. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Lax?
Yes.
Mr. McAvoy?
Yes.
Mr. Philipchak?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Simmons?
Yes.
Dr. Cohen?
Yes. I have a motion then
carries.
for items B2 through B4.
So moved.
Second?
Becker, Mrs. Shaw, is there any discussion on any of those items? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, and abstentions. Moving on to operation items, motion for items C1 through C3.
So moved.
Mrs. Becker? That was Mrs. Shaw. Is there any discussion on any of those items? Mr. McAvoy?
Mr. Giuliano, what's the difference between a change order in C1 and a change directive in C2?
Change order is the result of identifying with the contractor what the actual costs will be. A change directive is where we are telling the contractor, you must do thus and such, and then we'll reconcile the cost after the fact.
The C1 change order with regard to the high school cafeteria, the students are in the cafeteria enjoying their meals, enjoying their 90-inch screens, but there still was a cost?
These are change orders that had not come through
I see.
for approval.
So would you say now the cafeteria is done?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. McAvoy, just to clarify, these are change orders that I was actually involved in this summer when Mr. Giuliano was on vacation, as we started to do the demo in the faculty dining area.
We're at the mercy of a change order, right?
I think when you do any renovation, you must anticipate that you are going to discover something that you can't foresee, especially when you take apart existing structures where we might have issues like this, where we have termite damage, contamination, rotted wood. And simply the decision in this case was, once we demoed the walls,
Right.
it was about restoring the facility in its proper condition and doing it right the next time. So there wasn't even the opportunity for remediation. Once they pulled down the existing walls, the substructure underneath the walls literally came apart like paper.
Right.
So we actually installed a metal furring system instead of wood. So this can't happen again.
And we talked last time about C3, right, at our last meeting? We discussed that?
We did.
So we're to coin one of my own phrases, we're tapped out on the high school gymnasium, and we're looking at a January 1 completion without Possibly any more change orders?
Without,
Any more change orders?
I can't guarantee
Can't
that.
guarantee that, right?
I can't guarantee
We
that.
hope to minimize the change orders that come before the board, but, yeah, there's absolutely no guarantee.
No guarantees, okay.
There-
Once they put that floor down, yeah, I don't think they're going to find anything.
Well, we could do without the floor. I mean, Mrs. Shaw likes those springboards. I think the stuff underneath the floor is kind of springy.
Once we put that floor
We
down,
could just do that.
we should be okay, all right.
Then we could buy more 90-inch televisions that we
That'd
don't
be
have,
really
because
great for the
90-inch
basketball
TV is
team.
big.
You can jump even higher.
So, I think it's a 71. I think it's 70. Still, they're nice. It's great. Absolutely gorgeous. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on those items? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? I need a motion for items D1 through D7.
Second.
Becker, Mrs. Shaw, is there any discussion on any of those items?
I think there's,
Mr. McAvoy.
I'm just looking at, scrolling and looking at the D7.
Finding that computer real quick, aren't you? I'm already there with my paper.
You're funny tonight.
Good one, John.
Is that, Mr. Giuliano, is that anything new? I just,
On D7?
yes.
Yes. D7 is
We're finally getting Bow Monroe
the result of
walkway and,
a Buildings and Grounds Committee meeting that was held last week. This is basically, we're planning. We're planning ahead on a number of projects so that we can get the cost estimates and the specifications and all of the plans prepared so that when we have the financial resources, we're ready to roll. And just so the public is aware of what we're talking about here, we have a sidewalk replacement at the rear of Bow Monroe School at the top of the hill that accesses the property. We are looking at the traffic circulation improvements in the main parking lot of the high school. Community programs facility so that we can relieve the elementary schools from the use of those classrooms on a full-time basis. Bow Monroe Elementary School facility, taking a look at the site for what can or can't be done at that site. Warnsdorfer Elementary School window replacement for the entire facility. Frost Elementary School window replacements, again for the entire facility. Chittick School window replacements, and also at Churchill, the window replacements at the North Annex, which was not done at the time that that facility received the core facility improvements.
Have we received approval yet to do the security vestibule at Bound?
We have the state approval to move forward with that. Those specifications are being worked on now so that we can move forward with a bid and get that work done. If you recall, there was an alternate plan we were trying to pursue, which became, which did not become feasible due to some issues that we encountered with the county.
Yes.
And so we've reverted to the original plan, which won't require the construction of a extension onto the building. It will be done within the constraints of the existing structure.
Okay.
and as a member of the Buildings and Grounds Committee, I recall the discussion being proactive, exciting, dynamic. When you look at these numbers, it might be a little scary, but I recall, and I use this analogy often, when I came on the Board of Education 3 years ago, I sat down with Mr. Giuliana, and he said, Mr. McAvoy, I have $1.8 million worth of projects that I'd like to get done. So when you look at these projects that are in the future, that's not even something we're actually doing, and maybe it totals around $3 million, not even close to what the overall projects that you'd like to get done. So I like
I
the
think it
fact
was
that-
$100 million.
I thought it was a year's budget
Well, when
of
we-
projects that we needed.
Right. When we look at the overall long-range facility plan, that facility plan is probably in the $130 million
Right.
range of
Oh, I
work to
said
be
1
done.
point, right,
Yeah.
the 100, right.
100
So this is,
$130 million.
I mean, this is what we can afford, and this is
Right,
not something we're
exactly
doing
right.
tomorrow, but we are planning
Right.
for the future.
And there will be, I anticipate on the next agenda, there will be additional projects that will be coming forward for planning so that we can get those, all the details worked out now and in the next, let's say, 6 months or so that we're in a position to be able to quickly move forward once we have the financing.
Another critical piece of this is Mr. Giuliano and I met with township officials recently to really clarify the inspection, permitting, and approval process, and giving them heads up that we were going to engage in this practice after we had talked to building grounds, so that this becomes a seamless process. So we're ready to go shovel the ground as soon as students leave buildings, or whenever we have an opportunity when students can be moved to other parts of buildings, if that ever occurs. But we need to take advantage of every critical day that we can get when students don't occupy buildings, so we can really expedite these projects and bring services back to our students, which is extremely critical.
Thank you, Dr. Cohen.
Thank you. Any other discussion on those items? Okay, all those, need a roll call?
We do?
Yes.
Where does it say that?
It's not indicated, but the withdrawals from capital reserve do require a roll call.
Okay, please, go ahead.
Mrs. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Chu?
Yes.
Mrs. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Lax?
Yes.
Mr. McAvoy?
Yes.
Mr. Philipchak?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Simmons?
Yes.
Dr. Cohen?
Yes.
Motion carries.
I have a motion for items E1 through E3, noting that there is an addendum at the dais for the recommendation of Danielle Danino for the position of principal at Central Elementary School.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Becker and Mrs. Shaw, is there any discussion? We have a roll call?
Yes. Mrs. Becker?
Yes.
Mrs. Chu?
Yes.
Mrs. Howard?
Yes.
Mrs. Lax?
Yes.
Mr. McAvoy?
Yes.
Mr. Philipchak?
Yes.
Mrs. Shaw?
Yes.
Mr. Simmons?
Yes.
Dr. Cohen?
Yes.
Motion
Is
carries.
there any old business?
No old business.